It was nearly midnight when I first spotted the headlights. They were advancing up the long gravel path, moving with a slow, calculated menace, like predators testing the edge of a campfire. A trio of identical black trucks advanced, one by one, until their engines idled with a low, threatening hum just past the porch. I could just discern their silhouettes, burly men, shaved heads, and the glint of tattoos in the dim porch light. One shouted, times over, "Old man!" Another voice added, "You're finished here." Inside the farmhouse, my grandfather didn't even bother to look up from his workbench. He was occupied with cleaning his old M1 Garand, the same rifle that had hung over our fireplace for most of my childhood. He just murmured softly, "Gangsters? How quaint." The absolute serenity in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could even manage a question, he stood, slipped on his faded Marine Corps jacket, and said, "Stay behind me, son. Let's give them a lesson on what a real homeowner's defense is." That was the evening the HOA dispatched hired muscle to frighten a farmer. Instead, they inadvertently declared war on a veteran who had carved this land from nothing with his own hands. You see, before this chaos, the farmhouse and its surrounding acres were like a scene from a postcard. Verdant hills rolling into one another, a classic red barn, and a pond that captured the morning sun perfectly. My grandpa, Henry Walker, had tilled this soil since he was 16. He served in Korea, returned, and built a life from the wilderness. He always said the same thing about his land. It remembers who respects it. I had returned from Denver after my father's death. I'd spent 2 decades confined to a cubicle, staring at screens. Now, I was out here, learning to set fence posts, feed cattle, and patch leaks. It was exhausting, but it was honest. And working by his side, I finally felt like I was building something real. Everything was tranquil until Silver Creek Estates broke ground across a ridge. It was a new, opulent development, pastel mansions with gates, surveillance, and a fountain that probably cost more than our entire barn. They advertised themselves as a model of order and harmony. Grandpa called it a plastic paradise. At first, there were neighborly barbecue invitations, wine tastings, glossy brochures. The residents would wave as they drove past, pretending we were all part of the same community. But that superficial politeness quickly began to decay. One morning, we received a letter embossed with gold leaf. "Dear Mr. Walker, we have noted that your barn is situated uncomfortably close to our new community walking trail. It may obstruct the scenic view for our residents. Please relocate or remove it within 30 days. Grandpa laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "That barn's been standing since the Eisenhower administration," he said. "Their trail is 6 months old. Tell them to move their dirt path." I mailed back a brief, polite refusal. 2 weeks later, a new letter arrived. "Your rooster violates our community noise restrictions." Then another, "Your cattle fence is unsightly." And another, "Your irrigation line encroaches on HOA boundaries." Every single one was signed in flawless cursive. Martha Caldwell, HOA president. Martha was the type who wore pearls to walk her dog. She had amassed a fortune flipping properties and carried herself as if she owned every horizon she could see. She wore that fixed, artificial half-smile that people use when they're convinced they are smarter than everyone else in the room. One afternoon, she drove up our driveway in her white Lexus, the tires crunching the gravel like small arms fire. I was repairing the gate when she emerged, a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Mr. Walker," she began, her voice syrupy sweet, "we must discuss your property boundaries." Grandpa stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. "Do we, now?" "Yes," she insisted. "The HOA is expanding our walking trail by 40 feet. It's going to make a lovely park for our residents. Unfortunately, a portion of your pasture falls inside the expansion zone." He stared at her, unblinking. "You mean my pasture?" "Well, technically," she said, tapping her clipboard, "the property maps are ambiguous. It would be simpler for everyone if you just signed this easement agreement. You'd still technically own it, but we would maintain it. You'd be contributing to the community." He leaned on the fence post, his voice quiet but sharp. "I fought in a war for this country. I didn't come home to surrender a single inch of it." Her smile fractured. I'd hate for this to become unpleasant. He smiled back, devoid of all warmth. Unpleasant is my specialty. That night, he sat by the window with black coffee, staring into the dark fields. They mistake kindness for weakness, he murmured. Let's see how they handle boundaries they can't buy. Over the next few weeks, bizarre things started happening. Spray-painted arrows appeared on our grass. Wooden stakes were hammered into the soil. A construction notice sign was erected by our gate. The county confirmed no permits had been filed. Someone was just trying to intimidate us. Then, a pile of old tires appeared at the end of our drive. A drone with a flashing red light hovered over the barn every night, like a devil's eye. And one morning, I discovered our mailbox torn from the ground with a note pinned to it. Sell now before it gets worse. I wanted to call the sheriff, but Grandpa stopped me. The sheriff is just a man with a badge, he said. These people need a lesson in something older than the law. Respect. He proceeded to change every lock, reinforce the motion lights, install cameras, and hang a new sign at the gate. Private property. Trespassers will leave in worse condition than they arrived. When I told him it was overkill, he just winked. Boy, sometimes you have to teach people manners the old-fashioned way. A week later, Martha returned, this time accompanied by two men in black suits. One had the word pain tattooed across his knuckles. The other's jacket bulged significantly near the shoulder, where he concealed something heavy. Mr. Walker, she said sweetly, pretending I wasn't glaring, we're giving you one last chance. Sign the easement, or the HOA will take action. Grandpa looked up slowly from his chair. Lady, he said, you are about to learn a valuable lesson about taking action on another man's land. And what's that? She scoffed. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes the land fights back. That night, I watched him pull an old wooden chest from under his bed. Inside were medals, a compass, and a leather notebook labeled Defensive Perimeter Protocol. He flipped through pages of hand-drawn diagrams, lighting angles, wire traps, and fallback zones. You think they'll really come? I asked. They already have, he said. They are just waiting for dark. 3 nights later, a rumble echoed across the hills, but it wasn't thunder. It was engines. I stepped onto the porch barefoot, my heart racing. 2 sets of headlights idled by the far fence. No one moved. They were observing. Grandpa appeared beside me, thermos in hand as if it were an extension of his body. Don't move, he whispered. They are measuring our courage. After a minute, the trucks rolled away, but their tire tracks sank deep into our soil, cutting through the grass Grandpa had planted 40 years ago. The next morning, I found boot print behind the barn and cigarette butts near the fence. Steel toes, Grandpa muttered, crouching. Contractor boots? Maybe ex-cons. They are sloppy. Good. That afternoon, the mail truck delivered a thick envelope stamped with the HOA logo. Inside, final warning. Cease all resistance. Failure to comply will result in forced removal through legal and extra-legal means. Grandpa read it twice, folded it, and slid it into his pocket. They've gone and said the quiet part out loud, he murmured. That night, I heard him out in the barn hammering metal, testing wires, and adjusting lights. When I asked what he was building, he just said, insurance. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of engines yet again. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the window. There they were, 3 men creeping through the field, their voices low. Cut the power, one said. Torch the shed. Make it look like an accident. Before I could shout, Grandpa's voice boomed from the darkness. Son, hit the switch. I slammed the main breaker. Every light on the property exploded to life. Halogens, barn lamps, even floodlights he'd wired to car batteries. The night turned to day. The men froze like deer. Then the sirens started. Not police sirens. The old grain silo alarms he had rewired. They howled across the valley like war horns. Horses panicked. Dogs barked. And the intruders bolted toward the fence. Too late. The ground gave way beneath them. Grandpa had covered an old drainage ditch with loose boards and hay. They fell knee-deep into muck and manure. Welcome to the Walker Spa. Grandpa yelled from the porch. We offer free mud baths and humility lessons. I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. One man slipped trying to climb out. Another cursed, sinking deeper. Grandpa leveled his M1 Garand, not aiming directly, just enough to make them freeze. "Sit tight, boys," he said. "The sheriff is on his way." "You're insane," one yelled. Grandpa smiled. "No, son, just experience." Then one of them reached into his jacket. Grandpa fired, not at him, but at the ground near his boots. The dirt exploded loud enough to make everyone flinch. The man screamed, dropping a lighter and a can of gasoline. "Fire and farming don't mix," Grandpa said. "You might have learned that if you ever grew something besides trouble." Deputy Collins arrived minutes later, sirens blaring. "Frank," he sighed, seeing the scene. "What the hell did you do this time?" "Caught me 3 trespassers," Grandpa said calmly. "Attempted arson, intimidation, and first-degree stupidity." Collins cuffed them, shaking his head. One muttered under his breath. "She said this would be easy." "She?" I asked. He glared, saying nothing, but we both knew who. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Local HOA hires thugs, fails spectacularly. The footage from our cameras went viral. People online called him the farmer who fought back. Martha tried to spin it. She held a press conference claiming they were rogue contractors. But when one of them confessed she paid them in cash, her empire cracked overnight. Half her board resigned. The rest begged her to step down. She refused, screaming at reporters, "That old man humiliated me." Meanwhile, Grandpa sat on the porch sipping lemonade. "You know what the best part is," he said, grinning. "They haven't even realized that was a polite version." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He chuckled. "Every lesson has levels. They're about to take the advanced course." It turned out he'd been saving something. Old deeds and maps from the 1950s. He called up his buddy Dale, a retired surveyor. Together, they remeasured the boundary lines. And what do you know? Silver Creek's Fancy Park Fountain, their utility shed, and 2 of their corner homes were all built 12 feet onto our land. "Looks like they've been living rent-free," Dale said, laughing. Grandpa smiled slowly. "Then maybe it's time we collect." That night, we printed a giant sign and hammered it right at their gate. "Notice of unpaid occupancy. Portions of Silver Creek estates located on Walker property. Monthly land use fees now apply." By dawn, half the neighborhood had seen it. By 9 a.m., Martha's Lexus screeched to a stop in front of our gate. "Henry Walker," she shouted, her heels sinking in the mud. "What do you think you're doing?" "Collecting rent." "This is defamation." "Oh, it's truth," he said, handing her a copy of the survey. She skimmed it, her face turning pale. This can't be right." "It's right enough that the county will back it," he said. "You built that pretty fountain 12 feet too far west. Those 2 houses down on Maple Drive? You're technically my tenants now." She looked like she might explode. "You'll regret this." He smiled. "Already don't." Over the next week, chaos spread through Silver Creek. Surveyors, lawyers, and PR consultants scrambled. But Grandpa had already sent everything to the local news. The headline read, "HOA illegally built on veterans' land." By the time the HOA board met again, it was over. Grandpa walked in wearing his Marine uniform, medals gleaming. The room fell silent. "This meeting is for HOA members only," Martha hissed. He tipped his hat. "Then you better call the sheriff, because half your homes are sitting on my date." Gasps. He spread the maps across the table. "You tried to take what wasn't yours. Now you'll pay rent or move your fences." "You can't intimidate me," she spat. He leaned forward. You sent thugs to my home. That was intimidation. This is justice." The board voted to suspend operations indefinitely. The HOA was dead in the water. But Martha wasn't done. A month later, she sent new men to our farm, thinking maybe she could scare us one last time. Only this time, Grandpa was ready with floodlights, alarms, and sprinklers. They tried to sneak through the fence and got zapped by a low-voltage line. Then came the sirens again, and the sprinklers drenched them in ice-cold well water. By the time Colin showed up, they were soaked, muddy, and furious. The biggest one, built like a bulldozer, glared at Grandpa. "Martha's going to ruin you." Grandpa grinned. "Son, you're standing in cow crap with cuffs on. I think we're clear who's ruined." A week later, the real news broke. Martha had embezzled $60,000 from HOA funds. Her developer partner, Evan Lockwood, was under investigation for environmental fraud, building over a protected wetland. When federal agents rolled up to Silver Creek, Martha's little empire collapsed overnight. Grandpa didn't celebrate. He just said quietly, "When greed grows roots, justice pulls weeds." After the trial, reporters asked how it felt to win. He said, "I didn't win. The land did." Then something beautiful happened. Letters started pouring in. Veterans, farmers, homeowners, all saying the same thing. "You gave us courage." Grandpa read them every night. "Courage ain't something you give," he said. "It's something you remind people they already had." Months passed. The farm healed. Grass grew where the fence had been broken. Birds came back. Life settled. Then one morning, a black government SUV pulled up. A woman in a Navy suit stepped out. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm Agent Ramirez from the Federal Housing Authority. Because of your documentation, we've uncovered fraud across multiple HOAs. You've helped recover millions." He shook her hand. "Didn't set out to be a hero. Just wanted to keep what's mine." She smiled. "Sometimes that's exactly what fixes a system." She handed him a letter. "Your land is fully restored. All easements voided. The HOA is dissolved permanently." He nodded once. "Good. Maybe now the soil can rest." That night, we sat on the porch watching the sky burn orange and fade to stars. I asked him if he ever regretted fighting so hard. He smiled faintly. "Regret? No. I just wish it hadn't taken this much noise for people to remember what respect looks like." He looked out at the fence line, glowing in the moonlight. "They thought land was something you manage. But it isn't a trophy. It's a trust. You take care of it. It takes care of you." He handed me his old compass, the one from Korea. "Every man needs to know where true north is. Mine's this farm. Make sure yours ain't a screen or a dollar sign." I swallowed hard. "I'll take care of it, Grandpa. I promise." "Good," he said. "Then I can rest easy." And he did. The lawsuits faded. Reporters moved on. And the farm grew quiet again. The soil remembered. It always does. Because every scar, every fence post, every stand you take for what's right, it all becomes part of the earth. And the earth never forgets who stood for it. So if you've ever had to fight for your land, your dignity, or your peace, just remember what my grandpa taught me. You don't fight evil with rage. You fight it with patience, proof, and a good fence. They came with greed and left with humility. They arrived as conquerors and crawled away as students. And the old Marine who taught them that lesson never had to raise his voice again. If you've ever stood your ground against bullies, drop your story in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from, and what you'd have done if the HOA came for your land. Because out here, we've learned one thing for sure. Every fence line has a story worth telling.